Hey, everyone. Hey, Tom.
Hey, Kristen.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Welcome to SoDA Series Live. I'm Kristen Bell from the Strategic Development Team here at Adobe, and this is Tom Beck, Executive Director of SoDA. I can't believe it's the last one of the year. What? It's
I know,
December already.
This is insane. This is insane.
So for those of you joining us for the first time, SoDA Series Live is a collaboration between Adobe and SoDA, the Society of Digital Agencies, where we bring you candid, in-depth discussions with creative leaders from all around the world and invite you to be a part of these conversations. So please take a moment to say hi in the chat and let us know where you're joining from. Also, we'll be fielding questions with our guests throughout the show, so don't be shy to pop those in there as well. But before we get started, Tom, do you want to take a moment and just tell the folks joining us a little bit more about SoDA?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks everyone for joining. We appreciate it. I'm Tom Beck. I'm Executive Director of SoDA. And SoDA is a membership organization for founders and leadership teams of digital design studios around the world. We've been around since about 2007, and we have around 100 member agencies in 20 countries around the world. And our mission is really to create a community for these leadership teams to leverage the knowledge, experiences, ideas, perspectives of each other to help grow their business and to continue on their journey of building world-class creative companies and cultures. And we've been partnering with Adobe since the very beginning, 2007, and really grateful for that partnership. And in fact, I'm rocking the Adobe hoodie from Adobe Max in 2019, believe it or not. This is probably the longest I've ever held on to a swag item. So the Adobe team, this is like my go-to hoodie now. But anyway, we thank you guys for being here today. We're looking forward to a great discussion.
Yeah. And thanks for partnering with us. We love that we're able to work together and kind of bring the SoDA ethos to the wider community. So thank you for that. Okay, so let's get started. I'd love to bring on Talon. Talon Wadsworth is, hey, Talon.
Hey, Kristen.
Hey, Talon. Good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you too. And actually, I love it because I designed that one.
Did you design it?
I did. I totally designed that one. I love it when I see people like wearing the swag, and I'm like, oh.
My wife was just asking. She's like, "Oh, now do you need any new hoodies for Christmas?" And I'm like, "Nope, I'm good. I'm good. I got my hoodie."
That was a great event that we did to kick off that Max, and that was probably the last time I saw like a bunch of people we've talked to over the past 2 years, like in person.
That was the last time I was there. I know it was partially in person this last year, but that was the last time I was there in person too. Really, really. Yeah. So I look forward to getting back to them in the future.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah. 2023.
There we go.
Okay, so Talon is a principal designer here at Adobe and a great partner with us in this series. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Always my pleasure. Always my pleasure.
Okay, so Talon, do you want to introduce our guests for today's episode?
Yeah, or Tom.
Sorry.
Tom's got the
brain. Tom, will let you
No problem. Yeah, I'm happy to. So today I want to introduce our two guest speakers. First of all, we have Nate Butler as a creative director at Column 5. Column 5 is a longtime SoDA member based in California. They're a creative agency focused pretty heavily on the content, kind of in strategic content marketing side of the equation. Work with great brands like Dropbox, Mozilla, Netflix, SAP. And again, Nate is the creative director there, and we're thrilled to welcome Nate.
Hey, Nate.
Hey, Nate. Thanks for joining today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My pleasure.
And secondly, we'll have Danny Paul from Electric Factory. Danny is an executive creative director there. And Electric Factory is a digital innovation studio based in Montevideo in Uruguay. Again, another I think Juan and the team at Electric Factory have been members since very, very early on in the days. And they do, incredible digital innovation work for brands like Toyota, Nike, Snapchat, NBA, Coca-Cola. The list goes on. And so we're thrilled to welcome Danny today as well.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Danny.
Hey, Danny.
Hey, Danny. Thanks for being here today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yay.
So with that, Kristen, you want me to? I can give a few logistics, and
Sure.
Well, drop off sounds good. So Kristen and I are going to drop off camera and we'll be interacting within the LinkedIn comment thread. So we encourage all of you who've joined us today to, again, as Kristen said, introduce yourself, let us know where you're from, make comments along the way, and feel free to pose questions. We'll take those questions and give them to Talon, Danny and Nate, and get to as many of them as we can in the course of the conversation. So without further ado, we'll turn it back over to Talon and have a great conversation today.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Kristen. Well, Danny, Nate, such a pleasure to be chatting with you again. One of the reasons why when I joined Adobe, I didn't know I was going to enjoy my job as much as I have, and it really is because I get to talk design with such talented creatives like the two of you, and I get to do this. This is my job, and I'm just like, this is the best job ever. So, really happy to be speaking with you both today. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, same.
Cool. All right. Well, first, let's just to get, I like to make sure that everybody has a chance to kind of tell us a little bit about yourselves kind of before we dig into it, with an eye toward how did you get doing this whole design thing? Give us a little bit of that journey that sort of brought you to where you're at today. So Nate, why don't you kick us off? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So I went to school for design. My background is graphic design. I kind of started out in the traditional agency space. My first internship was at Young and Rubicam. I worked on Hot Wheels, Mattel, some random accounts like that were pretty fun. And then I met at the time Nick Bauer, who was the creative director of Stussy, and showed him my portfolio, and he was like, "Oh, come make some t-shirt designs and stuff for us." So I started interning there. Eventually got a job as a junior designer, stuck around for a little while, and tried my hand at apparel design. Eventually, I kind of shifted, and once I graduated, I moved up to LA and worked at an agency called Deadline, and that was eventually absorbed by Craig Murray Productions, which is still around in Burbank. Working on a lot of entertainment industry clients, a lot of film work, video games, worked on the Xbox 360 launch package, bunch of cool stuff like that. And then, and a bunch of Pixar movies. And then eventually started kind of making my own brand with a few friends of mine. We manufactured our own bicycle parts and frames and stuff like that. Did that for a few years. Eventually we got sick of each other and we went off to do other things. And that's when I ended up at Column 5. And as of November, I've been here over 10 years. So,
all right. Wow.
I love
Congrats, man. That's great.
Thank you.
Exciting stuff. And you've kind of worked on the gamut of stuff. And that's what I always like connecting with. Again, I think sometimes, especially in the UX industry, things can get really siloed, or like the experience that I see a lot of younger designers have is it's very specific. And of course, I mean, that's where the work is right now. But I think, I always appreciate kind of the wealth of experience and sort of applying design, with a capital D, kind of to kind of any place that needs it, and I love that sort of experience that you shared. So thanks for that. Danny, how about give us a little bit about you?
Sure. So I have kind of a strange history. I started out as a complete Luddite. I was a writer. I wrote poetry and fiction. I could barely use an email. That was my training. And at one point I was teaching poetry. And then I moved to Chicago. I became friends with a whole bunch of designers, and they gave me totally licensed versions of Adobe. And I taught myself the Adobe suite, and this was back in Macromedia Flash days. And I started just playing around and making stuff. And so, that basically led me into content production for education, because I was a natural connection to my teaching. And when I was working at Houghton Mifflin, they said, "Hey, listen, we need to have a frank conversation with you." I'm like, "Okay." And they're like, "We really love your ideas." And I'm like, "Where is this going?" And they're like, "But we can't afford any of them." They're like, "Have you ever thought about advertising?" And I was like, "No, I've never thought about that." They introduced me to Leo Burnett, and I ended up working there for quite a while. And my first day there, they gave me the Lego My Ego account. And so I worked on Kellogg for a long time. Lego Diagonal Special K, all their special challenges and stuff like that. I got to meet Snap, Crackle, and Pop. Those guys are really dirty, let me just tell you. Worked on Nintendo, worked on Samsung, worked on Allstate, got to make a commercial for the World Cup. So I kind of like weirdly backed into it. I was a Luddite. Then I taught myself all of the digital stuff. They gave me all of digital work. And then I was like integrated. And then I learned how to make commercials. Then I learned how to make print and then put it all together into this conglomeration, amalgamation of different design thinking and theories. So that led me to, I worked at Kramer Krasselt as well after that, where I did Corona, Porsche, Heinz, a bunch of stuff like that. And like a lot of people, I had my moment where I was a little disillusioned with advertising. And I left, I split, and I created two of my own companies. One of which was a digital music. It sounds so trite because this was even before Silicon Valley came out. But it was basically a digital music startup. And it was a whole community around that called Bandwidth, where you could mash up your own versions of songs and videos and blah, 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 blah. I did that, but at the same time, I was also doing product design because I kind of wanted to scratch the physical itch and be able to use my hands. So I made some physical products under the moniker of SoDA. Then after that, I had children, which means that I was unable to think anymore, and I needed to go back to the office. So oddly enough, I went to PricewaterhouseCoopers, which sounds strange, but I did experience design for PwC, and they're basically consulting kind of I don't know, area of focus. There's a lot of digital transformation and innovation, which was really crazy and cool because I had to figure out how to speak my language to people that don't speak my language at all. Worked at PwC for quite a while. Then after that is when I reconnected with the Electric Factory because I'd actually hired the Electric Factory through that entire span of my career. Like I worked with them like with Kellogg's, I worked with them on Corona, I worked with them at PwC, I worked with them some of my own ventures, and they were like, come join us, and eventually I did, and so I really enjoyed the kind of innovation work that we get to do at the company, and I have no idea what tomorrow is going to bring. So every day is a little bit of an adventure.
It's exciting. I like that, and I love the kind of the sort of design through osmosis sort of story there. And I think we all have a very similar touch point of using less than legally bought software to get our start. So yeah, we share that. I think a lot of us, that touch point. So I mean, you do what you got to do. You find the tools that you need to do the things that you want to do. You want to sort of like pull them out of your head and put them out there into the world, and just find a way to do that.
Yeah,
this is something very punk zine about that sort of drive to create, that I always really respond to. So
I never thought I would be making this admission to Adobe. So
no, see, it's just part of what it is, right? Like just like how you get the name out. Like if not condoning piracy in any way, but you gotta get the word out. Gotta get, Photoshop's a verb for a reason, and it wasn't always done above board. So, and actually there's something kind of in that story that I think we're going to touch on a little bit later, which I really see kind of in both your stories, which is an approach to design that really is holistic, that says that there are all these different moving parts that, make up a larger experience or a larger whole, when it comes to the writing, the content, the visuals, to the brand. That I think for a long time, especially as we transition into different mediums as designers, there's a tendency for business to start to kind of like try and piece that out and be like, oh, we're going to do kind of this over here. You get the content over here, we're going to get the brand over here and the experience over here, instead of like, I know one of the journeys I've been on here is to make that one big holistic story, that this is a through line, that we need that consistency, we need that tone, we need that style, really, hitting on all those different touch points. And of course, now we just have, thousands of touch points, it feels like sometimes, where people are interacting with these brands and services and products, Yeah. Well, cool. Well, we'll get there. I want to put a pin in that. But the first thing, because I think today our theme really is, thinking ahead. And this is what we like to do kind of at the end of the year, is really get some creative minds together and just talk about like, where are these things going? What is design going to mean? I mean, we don't want to get that high-minded about it, but like, what are we going to be? How are we going to be working? What are the things that are going to be shaping how we work, and the things that people want us to do, in the new year? And of course, the one I think that's on all of our minds, as well as hopefully I think everyone else out there, is really the role of AI. The role of automation. And how do we wrestle with these tools? How do we wrestle again? Speaking of the Luddites, are we the Luddites that are going in there and like, smashing the machines? The automatic sort of loom weaving machines, or are we? How are we wrestling with this question? How does AI impact our work, and how are we gonna reconcile this? And Nate, you want to kick it off there? Any thoughts? Anything you've been trying or thinking about?
Yeah, nothing client directly related, which I think Danny could probably elaborate on a little more. But some of the stuff that we've been talking about and playing around with has been especially in the writing sphere of AI, and how we can use that to make our lives a little easier, or help improve some of the automated messaging touch points that we have through our clients to their customers or to their audiences. So one thing that we've also been talking about is how to make that more transparent, that indeed this is not a human that you're speaking to, this is AI generated, and kind of embracing that and being forthcoming. And I think even that can create better bonds between people and brands when they feel like all the cards are on the table, and there's not anyone trying to like pass off something as real when it's not. In terms of the visual stuff, I think it's really exciting as a tool for visual reference and creating weird mashups and stuff. I think right now it's very much in its infancy, and it's kind of like for me in my workflow, it's kind of like a less accurate Google image search mashup kind of functionality, where if I'm like looking for references for like, I want to combine this with this, and I have these ideas, I'm looking for visuals to put together. Usually it's faster and easier and more effective for me to go out and find those individual references, as opposed to like seeing what kind of references an AI can pull together and mash up for me. So that's been my experience so far.
So there's really been like an embrace of these tools, and trying to think through how can we fit them in or map them to our workflows? How does it make us better at what we do?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Danny, how about you? Are we all going to be out of a job in the next few years?
I'm already out of a job. That's why I'm talking to you. No, not at all. I think that it is, as Nate said, it's in its infancy. It's in the shiny new phase instead of like the kind of like established how we're going to work with it. But it's an extremely, extremely powerful tool, and it's not a threat, in my opinion. There's still a lot to be worked out. There's a lot of things that we need to figure out about, how you train data sets and learning models and using other people's work and privacy. There's a ton of stuff to figure out with that, but it is super exciting and it is super powerful. We do use it with our clients sometimes. I think what Nate mentioned is really important, which is transparency. You have to tell people what you're using, why you're using it, where it comes from. That's both our clients and potential end users for those clients or brands. Like, they need to know as well how these things work, because they may not have an eye to say, well, look at the hands. And if you see their hands, you probably know that it's AI generated. I actually just read, I was reading quotes about AI yesterday, and I saw one of them. This comic book writer said that he said that it's giving him an excuse to have to draw hands because he needs to prove to everybody that he's not that.
Okay.
Yeah,
go ahead. Sorry, I was just going to say the hands thing. A little bit of lag. Danny, please go right ahead.
Nah, I could go about this forever. So let me just say this, because I think it's important when we talk about generative AI. I think it's important to remember that there's lot of different ways to use it, and those all have different ramifications. So if you're using it for reference or for inspiration versus using it for content creation, and also is that content creation mass creation or is it a stylistic creation? And also user generated content, which is of course the whole Lensa craze, but they're different. And you know, they all have different consequences. So sorry, go ahead.
No, I love what you're both speaking about in terms of like how do we wrestle with the responsibility and sort of the ethics, you know, of AI, and I think an embracing of it as a tool, which I like that theme. You know, I was reading a book recently where it talked about you know, like kind of like the Luddites with the weaving, but also with glassmakers, where you know there was something you couldn't physically create on your own, you know, in a flat, long, wide sheet of glass. Like physically, you just can't manipulate the material that way. And along comes a machine that then can do that. And kind of, again, separate from the Luddites with the weaving, the glassmakers were much more ready to you know, kind of embrace that technological leap. And then there was an explosion of creativity from that. And we get the sort of the classic Victorian glass, you know, atriums and, you know, greenhouses. And that was really the result of that. And I thought it was a really sort of fascinating sort of counterpoint to that, more like, oh, like the sky is falling, you know, in terms of the work that we can do, you know, more so like, what does this enable us to do? What does this tool enable us to do? And as long as we're wrestling with the responsibility and the ethics of it, right? Like we should be free to explore and to push, right? And to see where this fits into our work and how it will change how we work.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you bring up a really interesting point, though, because you're talking about glass blowers, glass makers, and they're already trained artisans, right? So they're already professionals in the field. And one of the things about AI that's a little terrifying for people is that it is for everybody. Anybody can use it, regardless of what kind of a background you have, how much training you have, whether you have spent 20 years doing design work and working with this and understand the efficacy of these things or not. So I think that that's where some of the conflict comes in, is people think, oh, well, look, anybody can plug in the prompts and then it just spits out something that looks like Wes Anderson. But I think that honestly, it's not a threat, because if you have something to say, if you have a story to tell, then it's just a tool, like you said. And part of what the tool can do is it can actually create a lot of content to almost a world build in a way that you could never do before. I know that AI has become the new metaverse and no one's talking about the metaverse anymore, but the metaverse is still around and it will be for a while. And when people are building these spaces, the effort required to design and build assets within that is quite labor intensive, and it's quite difficult. And sometimes it's not the primary aspect of the story. Sometimes it's not what you're focusing on. So AI can do things like that and create worlds and create the backgrounds that you basically fill in the characters, the story, and the primary focus, or the heroes, if you will.
Yeah. Oh, and I was going to share. So one of the points that I really liked that you're making, had been riffing in Midjourney recently. Again, just really wrestling with like how, what is this tool and how does it fit into the work that we're doing? And of course, now I have to like do the preferences and the settings with Chrome. And I guess I didn't set that all up, so I won't be able to share it. But there was something in there where they were saying where, as I was using it to sort of world build or concept, there was this moment where, I sent to a friend of mine because I said, this right here is something that I don't think I would have had the sort of courage to put down on paper myself. Like that the AI in its way is sort of devoid of any kind of apprehension to make, to combine, maybe sometimes really disparate elements together. And I was speaking of Wes Anderson, the project I was going to share, which was David Lynch's Dune, 1986, 87 Dune, which has a real, place in my heart. I saw it at Sting. I saw it at a very formative age, maybe a little younger than I probably should have, but it's stuck with me. So I was like, okay, well, what if I took David Lynch's, sort of vibe and mashed it up with Wes Anderson? You're mentioning Wes Anderson. I just wanted to see what happened. And it was just fascinating sort of what came back. But one in particular, there's a couple where I was like, actually, I think I may have had a spelling mistake in the prompt, and it came back with something just completely wild that just kind of like knocked me over. I was like, oh, that's not exactly what I had in mind, but like it showed me something that I would not have considered otherwise. And I think that's, to me, there's a nugget in there Nate, I don't know about you and how you think about that. Like, I'm sure, like in your take there, like that it can push us beyond maybe what we feel comfortable doing. Like that's maybe the role again, like kind of like the glass makers again, they could extend beyond their physical limits. Can we extend beyond even some of our mental imagination in a way with AI?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I think there's going to be a lot of value in more practical applications. Like I've already used it a little bit for when we're like storyboarding out a video or a motion graphic, and sometimes one of the trickiest things is like coming up with a new way to kind of position the camera within a scene to make it more interesting or different or evoke a certain emotion. And after a while, you've done a certain camera angles enough times that like just kind of repeating yourself, and you want something fresh. And that's one of the really great things that I've experienced specifically with Midjourney is like it's always going to be kind of a different composition that is often unexpected. And the fact that you can riff off of certain iterations and say, give me variations of this or whatever, I think it's super useful. I think on the higher level, the kind of language that we use for prompts is I think it's gonna evolve in an interesting way. Especially like I actually checked out that book that you were talking about, Craftsman, and I think in part 3 it talks about the language of communicating information.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was like probably my favorite section of the book.
Yeah.
And one of the things that stuck with me is talking about how to convey recipes or how to convey ideas. And like you can say, she was depressed, or you can say she walked with her head down slowly, towards the room, or you can say, or you can just show her with a sad face. And like all of these are conveying the same thing, but I bet using AI, because it probably interprets these things differently, would create vastly different outputs that could be really interesting.
There's something in there about expanding the language. Yeah, Danny, please. Yeah, expand on that.
No, I think it's really an interesting point, because I think that AI is learning based upon the data sets and also what we want, right? It's kind of learning how to work with us, and we're also learning how to work with it. And I think that a potential consequence of this would be that AI is going to get better at kind of feeding into what we want it to be more predictive. But I think it might also change the way that we think and the way that we design. Because I was talking to my team yesterday, and they were talking about how just in trying to develop these prompts for this project that we're working on for an actual end user using user-generated content AI, they had to design differently. They couldn't have a picture. Like actually, Wes Anderson, what's her name? Chris Moran, I think, is the creative director who comes up with the Wes Anderson look. Yep. And I remember that she wrote a long time ago, she said that that it's really hard working with him because he's already seen the movie in his head. He's already seen the whole thing and knows exactly what it looks like. Well, you can't do that with AI. You can't go into an AI project having already seen the movie. You're never going to see that movie. It's not like taking a pen and being like, all right, I can draw this out. I can film what's in my head. And that's substantially different, if you think about it. Also, you can't repeat. If you're trying to use the same thing over and over, like it's right now, it's not capable of doing that. So inspirational and expansive, yes, but also very different than the way that we design today.
Yeah, there's something I love that about sort of bringing in the role of like how how collaborators can actually push each other forward and actually beyond their limits, right, and what they're capable of imagining. And that it's not just Wes Anderson. It's Wes Anderson is translated by Chris Moran. It's Wes Anderson translated by Bill Murray, or whatever. Again, and in Wes Anderson's own sort of words, he has a general idea of where things are going, but then he tries to give everyone kind of the playground in which to operate, right? And so, we could maybe even think about that relationship with AI and in that collaborative way. And that's something other I've really loved about, it's experiencing Midjourney in particular, because it's a chatbot in Discord, and so you join the first sort of channel, learning how to do everything, and you're just watching these prompts from all these other people being generated in real time. and you are then free to pick up on and riff on what they're doing. And so the community, as well as the AI, is sort of learning from each other. Like you're building on the prompt that came before that got the result that you liked, and then you're pushing it to newer and newer heights. And that's a really fascinating sort of way. I don't think we can see where we'll all end up with this yet, but that's the stuff I'm really digging, is like that type of interaction and the way in which it pushes. We push each other, we push the AI, and it just gets better and better and better. And it's just like, well, sky's the limit then, in terms of as long as we're open to where it will take us, right?
Oh yeah, I learned something new from a YouTuber the other day. It seems really obvious now, but they were talking about stable diffusion, and I was joking about the hands earlier.
Yeah.
But he said you need to use negative prompts, and I was like, what? And he's like, it's not just about what you're trying to tell it to do; it's what you're trying to tell it not to do.
Not to do. Yeah,
and I was like, wow, I don't think like that. Like, I didn't even go that route. Like, I'm not going to go to my design team and be like, don't do like this, but you have to like do that with AI. So it's actually saying things like, no dysmorphia, no this, no that. And it actually then stable diffusion starts to look more like Midjourney, which tends to be more beautiful. That stuff like that is really interesting.
Really interesting. All right. So
kind of think of it as,
go ahead, Nate. Yeah, please.
I was going to say, it's kind of interesting if you think of it as like using UI to filter something. Say you select a category on Amazon, you're selecting a category, but you're also choosing not to select every other category or every other option. So the more specific you can get with what you don't want, that's a really great
results,
point.
Right? Yeah. So on this is kind of shifting topic just a little bit, but we had a great question, and I was interested in the two of yours take and how this is impacting your work and the work you're doing. But from Vanessa in the chat, she wanted to know, can you talk a little bit about Web3 design? Just maybe you can define it as you are sort of seeing it, assessing it. I mean, each of you, and then we can talk about how you're working in that space, if at all. And Nate, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question, and I tend to answer things cynically at first, and then more seriously after. So I would say the current state of Web3 design is derivative and not all that great, but I think there's tons of potential there. I think we're seeing a lot of trends in that space where, we see one project be successful and then everyone else tries to copy it and riff off of it until the next new and successful thing comes along. That's kind of how a lot of things work when there's like new technology or new, social memes going around that people want to try out or get excited about. Web3 is definitely a pretty big focus for us. One of our co-founders, Jason, he's really, really into that whole world. So we have a fair amount of Web3 client work that we're doing, and dedicating a lot of energy and thought to that. I think it's a really exciting space. It's definitely very, very much so in its infancy, probably even more than AI. And I think it's going to evolve a lot, but yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, no, it was a great start. Danny, anything to add there? Are you looking at Web3? Is it clients interested in it? Like what's the scene for you all there?
Yeah, I was joking that the last 6 months I've spent half of it in the so-called metaverse. So, I mean, we work in, Decentraland, Roblox, Fortnite. We're starting to work with Google Geospatial, which is going to be coming out and stuff like that. So, and a lot with XR. So we're very heavily in this space. The thing is, though, Web3 is, in its most strict definition, is about basically the blockchain. I mean, it's basically, smart contract enabled websites that we all can kind of participate in and go to at the same time, forgetting about decentralized autonomous organizations. But the thing about that is if you think about it as just a shared space, right, in its basic sense, the biggest challenge that we're finding right now is two words. And I hate these two words, but they are the two words: low poly. Low poly means that you can have this gorgeous idea or even a reference point, but as soon as you have to make it with a a certain amount of megabytes and a certain amount of triangles and pixels in mind, it is much more challenging. And the reason for that is because it still has to be rendered on somebody's computer. It's not like you can just watch a film like it's already done, or that is that your computer is trying to make sense of it. And if you don't do it right, they don't see anything, much less what you wanted them to see.
Yeah, just doesn't work.
But it's a different way of designing. We have different designers that do low poly, that do our really high-end graphics, because it's a different way of thinking.
It's a different way. Yeah.
Now we're cross-training.
Yeah.
We're cross-training, but it is very, very challenging. And making clients understand that is even more challenging.
Yeah, it's really interesting you said that, because I think that was one thing I was so hoping to sort of weave in here, was that with a lot of these, technologies and these new mediums, I've had this kind of theory for a while that relates to that, which is that we're really held back by the capabilities, of the platform, right? Or the tech, or the hardware, and what have you. But we're also limited by the tools, right? Like, it takes a lot of effort to produce work, in, whether it's Web3 or in the metaverse, right? There's not a pipeline yet that's been optimized, right, for the greatest number of people to come in and approach it to begin with, right? It's very specialized work currently. If you sort of talk to designers who are working in this space, and you low poly specialists, workflows in and out of Unity or other platforms, right? It's not easy, right? So it limits the people there, and it limits currently the imagination, in a way, right? You're limited by the technology. And of course, there's going to be smart people that come along, and they're going to build tools, and they're going to build new languages on top of that. And the hardware is going to get better and better. And so there is, in theory, an end point where this is going to become easier, and there's going to be the iOS explosion, as it were. But yeah, it still feels like we're just starting. It's just in its infancy, really.
Oh yeah. Definitely just starting. But I think we'll all become creative technologists in the future, because it's just becoming interwoven. And it's not that we all have to be coders, but to understand how technology works and the limitations behind it, and to use those more like to go back to my past, more like the form and structure of a poem, as opposed to, a limiting force, and to say that, how do I use these limitations to my advantage? Low poly can be beautiful.
Yeah,
it's just a different way of visualizing the world, and you have to kind of work with it in its own terms.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that. I've always thought about that. I'm a big fan of, I'm a printer on the side. A lot of my sort of hobbies relate to, printing like physical things. And even then, again, I think we sort of almost like, we've come so far that we've sort of taken it for granted that medium has, technology and rules behind it. And for those designers who can understand it, or they can do really amazing things with it. Like, they can trick the eye, using just, color and light, right? And they're utilizing the medium, but we've sort of gotten so used to the inkjet printer on everybody's, tabletop, that it's almost become like too easy. And so in a way, we've sort of forgotten that same thing, which is designers were craftspeople. They were technologists, even in the past, when it came to, again, these mediums that we kind of say like, oh, we've taken them for granted. We've solved print, right? And I think that's, to that age-old question, should designers learn how to code? It's like, well, what are you trying to do? And how do you need to understand the technology and the medium to produce the things that you really want to say, in those spaces, right? Yeah. Well, cool. Thanks, Vanessa, for that question. It's really great to sort of add in there. If anyone else has any questions, please feel free. Again, this is more of a kind of free-ranging, kind of Q&A, kind of, we're just sort of throwing it down here. So if you got questions, please add them in the chat. Let's talk about like how you see work continuing to evolve. Let's kind of go back to that, which is like, we've all been through the experience that we've all had the last few years. We've become, much more distributed. We've become much more global in our view. And I know, my team, I'm regularly working with West Coast, East Coast, Europe, India, right? And we've all adapted to different, one degree or another. But now that we've, kind of getting back a little what we used to have, how do you see, your teams, your organizations changing and evolving, into the next year? Nate, you want to? Any thoughts there? Any things you guys are wrestling with right now as a team?
Yeah, we were really fortunate prior to the pandemic that we were already remote first for a few years, and that made everything just immeasurably easier. So we've been able to focus more on fine-tuning our collaboration tools and methodologies, and working to remain close to one another, even though we were physically, you know, a lot of distance apart. So, we've done a few different things that have been really effective. One, creating like core coordination hours where everyone is expected to be able to connect for, you know, a 3 to 4 hour period. And outside of that, you can expect to have flow time and really be able to focus on the stuff that you want to focus on. And everyone respects that. And, you know, if you're going to try and schedule something outside of someone's core coordination hours, you really need to have a good reason for it. And they need to, give consent for you to schedule that. And that's been a game changer for us. We're talking about trying to figure out ways to shift to a 4-day work week. That's been really exciting for a lot of us to talk about and think about, because we have gotten more efficient as we've moved to remote first. It was challenging at first, kind of ironing out a lot of the kinks, figuring out, how do we communicate more clearly through alternative mediums and collaborate more effectively. But once we got over a few of those hurdles, we found it to be a much more effective way of working.
Mm-hmm.
And it's allowed us to, once that stuff becomes second nature, we can get back to focusing on creating the best stuff that we possibly can.
Yeah. Yeah. Danny, how about you? Anything from the last few years that you're going to be taking with you, or anything you're just going to like leave in the past? Like, yeah, how are things evolving there for you and your team?
Yeah, so we're in 4 countries in different time zones and all over the place as well. So, it's definitely a challenge. I tell you what, we're not doing anymore. No more planned remote happy hours. That's not happening anymore. The whole remote happy hour thing was we tried it. Spontaneous happy hours, great, wonderful. So if we're all collaborating, that'll work. But no, it's a real challenge actually to have those human moments. I think that the efficiency can be there. I mean, we do things like I love the stuff you're talking about, Nate. I mean, we do things a little differently. We work with like Miro and Figma a lot, but we also sometimes leave it. This may sound weird, an open video chat, just open for a team, and you can come in and out however you want, so that you can kind of collaborate. It's almost like the old school war room, where like you would go into the Lego room and like you were working on a Lego project. So we almost replicate that with the with video conferencing technology. But I'm not going to lie. I mean, I think that the challenges are immense in terms of creativity, because even with the war room versus that video conferencing, what I've been thinking about is, and what I want to try to figure out how to deal with next year, is how to have that feeling of motion and movement and collaboration. Because it's different sitting in a chair talking to people. I mean, I'm a pacer. I pace around the room and I draw on whiteboards and I'm all over the place. And I think that there's energy there. There's energy that people feed off of, and you lose that when you are on a screen. It's really challenging. Even this little box that I'm in right now, as you can tell, I speak with my hands. They're practically cut off.
They're just cut off.
Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Apparently hands are a theme. Who would have thought designers care about their hands? But yeah, it is a challenge. And I want to try and figure out a way that we can have a shared space that is not flat and is also not this.
Yeah.
Something in between those two. I'm not going to lie, I haven't found it yet. But we're experimenting with a lot of different software and a lot of things to try and find that collaboration, to create the energy again. And of course, when people are not in the office together.
Yeah. Now, there's something, I think that there is something unnatural about this type of mediated engagement, right? Like our whole senses have evolved over, tens of hundreds of thousands of years, right? To take in information, even in sort of an ambient way, and so, we might not, we use our hands, but we use our hands, there's a purpose behind it, the ways in which we're using inflection and we're using our body language in the way that I'm picking up on that, right? This just cuts it off, right? We don't have our full facility, when it comes to, using, everything we have to be, collaborative or be creative. So I 100% agree with that. And I think that's, like, it's been nice to sort of use this time to sort of like look back at where we were before and all the things that we just kind of took for granted. Right. And then start to evaluate that with a more critical eye. Oh, this was valuable. Oh, this wasn't valuable, and I think that's, right. The conversation isn't done. We're going to keep sort of figuring out like, yeah, what are we missing? And we don't have all the answers. And it's been great to see, like, and hear from, both of you in terms of like how you're dealing with it, wrestling with it, and hopefully, can drive a larger sort of conversation about how what's the environment that makes for the best work, like, yeah, I don't want to be interrupted all the time, but I also want to be able to like stand up and go get a cup of coffee and like have a conversation that might lead to some unexpected thing. And those two things are probably a little unproven or unfounded, but like it sure feels like that. Like there's something there that we're missing in both sides.
Yeah, the mute button is a great non-collaborator. I mean, I was thinking about it, not just between internal teams, but also with clients. I mean, I've given presentations to clients where everyone's on mute, and I have no idea if the jokes are landing, if they get what I'm saying. Do they love the design? Do they hate it? Are they going to like, give us a huge retainer after this or fire us? I have no idea. And then afterwards, it'll just be like a little thing in the chat that says, wow, that was amazing. And I'm like, I didn't feel amazing. Like, sure
you get the little thumbs up in Teams, just the anime. Like, it's like,
and I wish, I hate to say it. Like, look, the whole camera thing, it does make a difference being able to see people. So presenting to clients without the camera on is really hard. And you have no idea. They're muted. It's like presenting to a wall. And then you just like, how did it go? But if you think about it, that's not the collaboration that we want. So we try to bring clients as much as possible into the conversation, into the video chat, to work with us.
Yeah. And one thing I've seen people kind of slip into because of that kind of ebb towards like, do we really need to be in video, or do we really need to have that real-time interaction, especially when we're presenting work, is people thinking that like, okay, we don't actually need to present it in real time. We can just send it over. They can digest it and react to it independently. In my opinion, that's like, it's such a bad idea. Like,
I agree.
Completely. You're never going to be able to convey the same, energy and ideas, and it's going to be interpreted, who knows how many different ways.
Yeah, there's the understated part of our jobs as creatives, especially as leaders of our teams, which is like just like making the sell, like pitching the idea, right? And what, again, like it's not insignificant. Like the idea could be whatever, but it's about how you talk about it, how you get people excited about it. That's a lot of like what I do, which has been hard, which is like, I get excited about this stuff, and that's can be a little infectious. But when like I can't tell if you're excited or not, I like Danny was saying, I don't know how to read this room. I don't know what to do with that information, or lack of information, as it were. So, well, cool. Well, I wanted to sort of talk about one kind of last thing, I think, before we start to wrap up, which is, how do you see the role of agencies changing, if at all? And if you're already maybe starting to see some of the change, or you've been trying to implement some of that change, or clients are asking for different things, like how do you see the role of the agency, rolling into 2023 and beyond, and if it's shifting or not?
I can tackle that.
Yeah,
I'll jump in first. So I think that with this influx of technology and trends and all of these new things, that we're becoming curators of technology and curators of the world more than maybe in the past. So, I mean, the word that was always on the tip of our tongues is, well, why are we doing that? Instead of just getting a brief and responding to the brief and giving the client exactly what they want, we're asking why. Why do you want that? How does this relate to the core of this? Because we may deliver exactly what they think they want, but they may not be successful because it actually didn't have that fundamental strategic why to it. So, I mean, for example, a major streaming company that we're working with right now and doing an AI project for, they they came to us with this project, and we really had to nail into the why. And the why can't be because it's now and because it's cool. The why has to be, well, what's fundamental about this? How is this going to be impactful? So I think getting to the impact, getting to the why, and sometimes rebriefing the brief is something that's going to be continue to grow and change for agencies because of the amount of technology and the amount of options and the amount of unknowns.
Yeah, great point. I think that you know, I gravitate towards the design studios and agencies that I worked with, you know, before Adobe, because of that similar approach. It's like, well, the client's coming with an ask, and then we're going to evaluate that, and we're going to, you know, assess what we know of the medium, of the technology, and, you know, we try and know something about that, so we can come back with an informed idea of what, okay, here's what we actually could do, or here's what we think you might be asking us for, you know. And I think that all the best studios and agencies do that, rather than just sort of being this transactional, hey, I need this, you know, n number of screens for these social media channels, you know, go, which is like not taking away from that work at all. But I think that you're right, that like agencies, you know, offering, you know, a perspective, offering expertise, you know, is really going to set that up for, you know, for success for both, you know, the client and for the agency, right? That's the ideal scenario at the end of the day. So Nate, how about you? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I would echo all that 100%. In addition to that, I think we're encouraging a lot of clients to create less stuff but higher quality. So, you know, spending more time, energy, budget, thought, whatever, on coming up with just a few things that could end up being even more impactful than if they were just kind of take a shotgun approach and try and put out as much content as they can, which I think has been a way that things have been moving for the past, you know, couple of years. Client teams have kind of ballooned a bit and, you know, grown to the point where there's a lot of people that do a lot of different things, and sometimes they get kind of disconnected. They each want to make sure that what they're working on is visible and that, you know, they get their name on things and they can show that they're providing value. But I think as a lot of, at least for our clients, a lot of them are kind of contracting or kind of you know, looking for ways to make sure that their money is being spent well. I think that's a great first step to really moving in that direction is, you know, let's look at what's working and what's not. And the stuff that is working, let's do that even better than we were before.
Yeah.
And I think that honesty and that transparency is going to go a long way towards establishing, you know, a good amount of trust with the client.
Great word. I think that's the key is, right, you build up these great relationships and ideally it leads to better work all around, right? Like, and that's really where it starts, is building up that trust and transparency, you know, with clients and your other collaborators. So it's a great point. Okay, I want to get back to your personal creative practice for a minute here. Let's get too high-minded about it. But how I always like to ask people, I'm gonna a question, but I'm actually gonna change it a little bit today, just sort of in the moment here. How are you trying to grow yourself, you know, creatively, you know, in the new year? And again, that could be any number of things you're exposing yourself to, things you're going to try for the first time. What are those things? And how are you trying to stay creative, to stay inspired? And what are things you're looking to try and do as we roll into the new year? Danny, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So I think that one of the things that we just had a great meeting with our whole creative team about inspiration, and I asked everybody to bring in a piece of inspiration because at this time of the year, people are largely not feeling entirely inspired. You know, like we're a little bit worn down. Like this is always a tough quarter, and like the holidays. And I think that one of the interesting things that happened in that conversation is one of my designers said, he said, "I don't have anything." And I said, "That's okay." He goes, "I didn't not do the assignment. I honestly couldn't think of anything." And I was like, we are all there sometimes. And that's something that I think that we forget, is that it's not that you're inspired. You have to find the inspiration. We have to help each other find inspiration. So I told him, that's why we're here. I was like, I felt exactly how you're feeling when I'm driving to and from the office. You got to learn how to like look again. Like you have to actually start seeing things again and pay attention to the world instead of our own myopic, self-interested view of everything. And I have to get this one thing done and this one project done. So I think paying attention is what I'm trying to do. And I'm trying to get everybody to think about. Pay attention to the world, to nature, to music, to different. I'm watching Our Universe right now on Netflix. Like you know, just different things that have nothing to do with what I do. And just paying attention, because that's the inspiration that's where I find inspiration from. I can look at 1,000 pieces of work that are related directly to what I do, and I will learn a lot from it. But I'm going to probably get more out of something that's completely unrelated. And I love getting that from the whole team and being inspired by each other too.
That's my favorite piece of advice. I always tell, you know, our team, you know, junior designers I meet out in the world, you know, like be curious and be interested and always be looking for things that are going to be sparking you in some way and be challenging you and stretching you and growing you in some way. And those things always pay off. I don't care what it is. They always pay off. They always come out in the work. Might not be able to point it out like one-to-one, but like it's there and it drives the work forward. So I really love that. Nate, how about you? How are you trying to grow yourself creatively in as we roll into the new year?
For me personally, I found a lot of enjoyment working with institutions of higher education, academia, as they call themselves. For one, as someone who I dropped out of high school and I graduated from design school later, but I definitely do not have a traditional academic background. I was never a good student until I went to design school. Just not my thing. And it's been really interesting working with higher education because they have such a fixed way of seeing the world and assumptions that are made and different ways that they've kind of established that are ingrained in the way that they do things, that I've really enjoyed working with them to kind of challenge some of those assumptions or look at things differently. So I recently joined the advisory board for the University of California system for their design thinking curriculum. And in the past, I've worked with a few other institutions, and I'm hoping to work with even more on a strictly volunteer basis to kind of help them to rethink the way that they're teaching design related things and hopefully, create some new generation of thinkers that help us all to level up what we do.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. I always love, I'm lucky enough to work right next door to my school, to my alma mater there in San Francisco, and engaging with that and seeing the world through that lens is one of those ways to sort of recharge and rethink. And what I've been talking to a lot of people lately about is, that's something that's maybe the academia is something that's a little lacking in the UX space, in a way. Like and I love having that backing of that, and physically the school's right next door. I have this lineage of design thinkers, backing me up, and it gives me a lot of courage to go out there and to push for change, in the industries that I'm working with and the people I work with. And, something that I've been thinking a lot about too recently. So I really love that, Nate. So best of luck in your endeavors. Danny, same to you. Thank you so much. Best of luck in the new year, both of you. Thanks for being with me and having such a great conversation. I just feel like, I'm just like buzzing. I'm ready to go and make some great stuff. So really appreciate both your times. So we'll wrap it up there.
Talking to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Man, it's such a pleasure.
Appreciate
All right.
it.
Well, we'll bring Tom and Kristen back to wrap us up. But thank you again so much.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you, Talon. Thank you, Nate. Thank you, Danny. That was a really great discussion. And I love the conclusion, just in helping support each other and finding inspiration when you have a lull moment, and then just finding inspiration through giving back. I think that's a really great way to wrap and look forward to 2023. So thank you guys. It's awesome. Oh, Tom, you're muted.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
But yeah, I echo that, and thanks all for joining us today, and for all of you who joined us throughout the year. Yeah. This series has been really fun for us to connect with the community and have conversations about the discipline and the craft that we're all working with every day. And we'll be back again in 2023.
Yeah.
I don't know that we have dates yet, but I think, or do we, Kristen? But I think we're
We
working.
don't, but we will be back in January. We
Yeah.
are working on finalizing a date for January. So keep an eye out on the Creative Cloud LinkedIn site. And yeah, we hope to see you in 2023.
Yeah,
Have a
until
great,
then, we wish you all a happy holiday season and in a new year, and we'll look forward to seeing you in January.
Yeah, awesome. And thanks, Tom. Thanks for the
Yeah,
partnership.
thank you, Kristen. Yep.
You bet.